Hello and welcome to the DELMIA Quintiq webinar about planning in a disruptive world, how the food industry can respond. My name is Anna Burschek and I'm your host for today's webinar. The presentation will take around 45 minutes and we will have time for questions afterwards. But before giving the floor to our speaker, Jeff Lockett, I will explain some basic functionalities of GoToWebinar. On the right side of your control panel, you can select your preferred audio settings. The default audio settings are set on using microphone and speakers, but if you wish to use a telephone, please select that option in the menu and dial the number and the access code. During the webinar, all attendees are muted, but you can ask questions in the question box. And I will ask those questions to our speaker after the presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to Jeff.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Jeff Lockett, part of the professional services team here in Europe. I've got over 20 years experience in advanced supply chain planning implementations in the food and beverage industry and other industries as well. And I'm looking forward to taking you through this webinar over the next 45 minutes or so. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are around the world. Let's start by talking a little bit about the agenda that we have for you today. So we'll start by talking about the challenges that we see within the food and beverage industry. What are causing the disruptions? How can we approach those, and what solutions might we offer? We'll talk in detail about the solution from Dassault Systems and the options that we have to help you manage that disruptive world. We'll drill down on the supply chain planning and optimization space. So the detailed planning, the strategic planning, and the tactical planning, and the solutions that will help you with that. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about some of our customers, so who are already getting benefit from the solutions that we offer. And maybe to wrap up and give us some food for thought for the future, I'd like you to share with me and imagine what a future world might look like with a fully interconnected supply chain system from end to end. So let's get started. So we live in a world of disruption. If you will, there are the classic disruptors, new business models. All industries are experiencing these. We know about the Teslas, the Ubers, the Airbnbs of the world. But of course, the food and beverage industry is also being disruptive. Marley Spoon and others with their home delivery options, restaurant quality meals direct to your door, all of the ingredients and a recipe card all set up. Things like Impossible Foods, revolutionizing the meat supply chain, transitioning from meat-based products to plant-based products into all of the Burger King restaurants and now also available in supermarkets. But that's not the only disruption. Looking forward, Memphis Meats, real meat, but without the animal. So fundamentally, we live in a very disruptive world. But it's not just businesses that are disrupting the industry. Also, our customers are changing. They have an opinion, a very strong opinion, of how we source our materials, the correct allergens, making sure that we do no harm to the planet, the packaging, the time. They want the product to be of the right quality and immediately available to them, direct to their home. So our business environment is also disruptive. Agile competitors, regulatory changes, we're seeing this more and more. Mergers and acquisitions, there are over 50,000 mergers and acquisitions last year globally. I think we're imagining that there'll be fewer this year. Maybe that's because of some of these global disruptions that we're experiencing. Certainly, the coronavirus pandemic has been a fundamentally game-changing situation. But also those changes can be opportunities if we tackle them correctly. We need that speed to market. We need to manage our new product innovation. We need to make sure that we get it out there and available to our customers right first time. And of course, the overall performance expectation is just going up and up. Shareholders expect companies to deliver bigger profits year on year, and therefore we need to make sure that we have the innovation and the capability to tackle this disruptive world. And technology can be disruptive, but also is an enabler. So big data and optimization, how do we make sure that we make the best decision? A good decision no longer is enough. We need to know that we've made the best decision. Simulation, machine learning, and AI. How can we actually use these technologies and these capabilities to make better decisions, to make decisions more rapidly, such that we're able to take opportunities as they come to us and haven't missed the boat, if you will, waiting for that decision to come through. The Internet of Things and digital manufacturing. When we look forward to the products we're going to launch, the supply chain we're going to have, the production lines we're going to have in the future, how do we make sure that we've evaluated all of the options and we've got the best decisions and the best choices selected, such that when they become a physical reality, we're able to take maximum advantage? So it is in many ways the perfect storm with all of these disruptors. We say here at Dassault Systems that actually it's an industry renaissance. And the fundamental question is, how do I plan? But do we see this as an industry renaissance, or maybe even a further industrial revolution with Industry 4.0? Back in the day, with the first industrial revolution, probably the people going through it didn't realize that that's what they were going through. It's only with hindsight we can experience that. But we believe fundamentally that this is an industry renaissance, and with all of these disruptions and all of these technology options coming forward, the companies that take best advantage of those will get ahead. So I'd like to talk a little bit now about the solution vision that we have for the food and beverage industry. And it starts from a central principle. At Dassault Systems, we believe that the virtual world extends and improves the real world. But what do we mean by that? When fundamentally we mean that by creating a digital twin, a digital version of your supply chain, of your product, of your distribution network, of yourself even, that with that we can then simulate what is likely to happen in the future. We can actually use that digital twin to do testing and analyzing that would be impossible in the real world, or certainly very, very costly. And by doing that, we can then make decisions more rapidly and more effectively than ever before. Talking a little bit about Dassault as a company. So we've got over 270,000 customers and 20,000 people working in the industry. We serve 25 million users in 140 different countries and have a revenue stream of around 4 billion. Historically, we're also known as the 3D experience company, because we've come from that 3D experience design world, with CATIA moving into product lifecycle modeling and then into the digital twin. And we were the first company to create a digital twin in collaboration with Boeing to work on their 777. And this concept of the digital twin will continue, and we'll talk a little bit about the benefits that that drives. So maybe asking ourselves the question, well, what am I going to do with this digital twin? And more fundamentally for us in planning, how do I get the best plans? Well, with that digital twin, fundamentally, it's essential that it represents our world as accurately as possible. And the digital twin in supply chain planning sense is a digital twin of our supply chain. So it has that representation, all of the stocking points, all of the products, all of the recipes, all of the routes to market, all of the different materials, and all of the constraints. So the capacities, the rules, the lead times. With all of that, we can then create an optimum plan. So what do we mean by optimization? So by optimization, we mean looking for the best plan, not just a good plan. You know, a good plan is probably no longer good enough. With optimization, we can steer the system to work through all of the different possibilities and find the best plan. But a plan's only as good as how you communicate it. So it's essential that we synchronize the decisions made at the various different planning layers. If we make a strategic decision to go and secure additional capacity, maybe from open a new line or launch in a new marketplace, that decision needs to flow down into our operational layer, where we actually decide what are the details on that line and how we're going to do that production. And then that decision needs to flow down into our execution space, which specific customer orders are going to be tackled on which day and in which hour on which day. So that synchronization from top to bottom and bottom to top is a fundamental requirement of any effective solution. And of course, with so many people involved at so many levels of the organization, effective collaboration between the different teams is essential. It needs to be clear, a decision made in one location, what the impact will be for the other levels in the supply chain, and how can I get that detail worked through collaboratively with my colleagues. Of course, the world is getting more and more complex, and our supply chains are getting more and more complex, and in often cases our products are getting more and more complex, and therefore we need to be able to simplify these processes. We need to have solutions that take that complex world and simplify the decision-making process, highlighting to you automatically where the benefits are, where the best decision is, and making the best decisions also the most obvious. And fundamentally, we need to make sure that we execute that at speed. It's no good taking a month or 2 months to make the best decision if you needed to be able to take that decision within 2 weeks or even 2 days or even 2 hours in order to take advantage of that opportunity. So speed of execution, this ability to leverage our supply chain, to leverage our digital twin, to make decisions for the better in a timeline such that they can be executed, is essential. So let's tap a little bit back and look broadly at the overall solutions that Dassault Systems provide as part of the 3D experience platform to the food and beverage industry. So starting over on the left with our product design and formulation. So before we even develop a new product, that design work can be taken in the 3D experience platform. It can be simulated, the physical properties, the color, the labeling, the shape, and that moves then into digital manufacturing. So I've got a new product that I want to launch. I've done the design work, but how will that work? Or will that work in my production facility currently? Or indeed, do I need to create a new production facility or capability? And how will that perform? So in this digital manufacturing world, we're creating a digital twin of the production line itself. So we're able to test that new product and how it performs before we even touch it. Optimization, and this is the area we'll focus on a little more, in terms of the planning that supply chain. At the strategic level with sales and operations planning, at the operational level with production planning, and then at the execution level with production scheduling. And then on into the execution side of things, distribution from our warehouses down to our customers, and even beyond that into the experience within the home or within the store retail environment. So all of these capabilities are available from Dassault System from end to end as required. So let's push down into that optimization space and the planning area. So we talk at Dassault about a number of different focus areas. Engineering the product in the first place, so its design, its simulation, and its product life cycle from initial concept through its operational lifespan, ultimately on to replacement with a new product and discontinuing of the old. Modeling of the product and its supply chain. So the factory space, how does that work? How does that operate? Can we simulate its capabilities? How will our new product perform in our current supply chain? How will our current products perform if we were to modify that production line in one way or another? Optimization. So all of the planning space, which is the main focus of this discussion. So demand planning, supply planning, inventory optimization, having the right strategy to get products in place, workforce planning, having the right people available to make those products, master production scheduling to deal with our customer orders, and down onto production scheduling on the shop floor. Linking through to transportation planning, either within our own supply chain or out to our customers, and optimization in that space. And then perform, execution. So actually managing products within our warehouses, managing the detailed operations on the product line, ensuring that we monitor them and maintain them and get products out first time right. And all of these different areas link into our ERP solution, where fundamentally the orders, the sales orders are captured, the work order requests are passed back, the feedback of reality of what's happened on the shop floor is captured and fed into the various different planning layers. But let's talk a little bit more about supply chain planning and execution space and this optimization theme that runs all the way through. So I've mentioned already that this integration between all of the planning layers is essential. So a decision once made, be it strategic, tactical, operational, or executional, will have influence, will have impact on the higher and indeed lower planning layers. So strategic decisions I make at the top must automatically flow down and influence the tactical decisions that I subsequently make, the operational decisions, and ultimately down onto the shop floor. Equally, constraints that I experience at the execution layer, unexpected downtime, will influence the operational planning, the tactical planning, and potentially could influence the strategic planning if we have a long maintenance period or a fundamental breakdown that can't be recovered in a short amount of time. So this seamless integration between all of the different planning layers is a fundamental capability of the solution from Dassault Systems. So let's start and talk a little bit about the functionality that's available and the benefits that that will bring. So let's start at that strategic and tactical longer term planning layer. So the first thing is we need to create our digital twin. So our digital twin, as I've mentioned, is the supply chain and all of its constraints. So the system provides capabilities to very easily and rapidly mirror the reality of your supply chain in the virtual world. So all of the stocking points, all the transportation routes, all of the customers, all of the suppliers, all of the capacity constraints that we have at all those different locations, the lead times, the recipes, and the manufacturing rules and regulations. So by capturing all of that information, we're then able to use this digital twin to then create appropriate plans at all of those different planning levels. So integrated business planning, or sales and operations planning, has been around for a long while now. And fundamentally, it's about balancing supply with demand, but doing so most profitably. And although it's been around for decades indeed, ask yourself the question, do you believe that you have achieved the highest level of maturity in your integrated business planning process? Gartner and others recognize a 5-level maturity curve. And generally speaking, most companies are around the level 3 position. By getting all the way up to level 5, you can have transformational benefits. So forecast accuracy improvements up to 25%, on-time delivery improvements by up to 50%, productivity improvements between 30 and 40%. So by continuing this journey, by actually getting through to that orchestration level where all of the decisions are fully connected top to bottom and financially evaluated, can really drive significant value to your business. In that integrated business planning space, there are kind of 2 key areas. The first is demand planning. How can we be sure that we've got the most accurate representation of what future demand is expected to be? And this has a number of different elements to it. The first is creating the best baseline forecast. So analyzing the historical trends and using statistical methods to then identify the strongest baseline forecast, a start point by which we can then build upon. So automatic data cleansing to deal with the errors of the past, statistical forecasting, multivariate forecasting to consider causal factors, and automatic model selection. But statistics on themselves are not enough. Demand planning is also a highly collaborative process. We have our marketing teams who have influence. We've got our sales teams who may be talking to our customers regularly. We've got crowd forecasting and looking at analytics from the marketplace, what's hot and what's not, particularly in food and beverage, where we have a rapid changeover of that product mix. So by taking that baseline forecast and then effectively collaborating and joining in all of these different inputs from our various different elements, we can then enrich that forecast to make sure that we have the best view of the future. But this can be a large and daunting task. We may have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of products. We maybe have hundreds, thousands or tens of thousands of customers, and therefore coming up with an accurate forecast for all of those products, all of those customers is a phenomenally large task. But the system can help us here. Machine learning and artificial intelligence, along with the classical approach of Pareto analysis, combine together to give us the ability for the system to analyze the historical patterns, choose automatically the most appropriate forecasting techniques to get that baseline forecast, and then fundamentally focus our efforts as a demand planning team on where the highest value is available. Where will our input maximize the benefit for the effort included? So the strategies that we employed here are the rules-based forecasting in order to narrow down the forecast options to the most appropriate, then automatic model selection to pick the best strategic forecast, joined with the Pareto analysis to then focus our efforts on the high value items. And all of this can be coordinated with a workflow to make it easy and straightforward and obvious what the next task is and what the highest priority items to work on would be. So having resolved our demand planning picture, we now have our best and most accurate view of the future. But not just that, we also will have created an upside and a downside strategy. So what if the demand was a little bit better than we're expecting, but also what if it was worse? And how would our supply chain respond? And by that we mean, how will it respond in a capacity constrained sense? So here, leveraging our digital twin, we will actually take that demand plan and ask the system the question, what's the best supply plan that we can create, considering all of the constraints that we have within our organization? So in this sense, we're able to then say, this is the best that we could do within the constraints, but also ask questions like, well, if I wanted to achieve that upside plan, how much extra would I need? What additional capacity might be required? i.e. production line? Is it in labor? Is it in transportation? Is it in raw material supply? And using that information, we can then strategically decide to pursue those changes and do more than would previously have been possible. Of course, we could have a lower demand, and then the converse is true. If demand is lower than expected, well, where do we have an excess of capacity? What's the risk? Could we have an excess of stock? And how are we going to manage that situation? As part of that supply planning position, we also need to think about, well, where should the inventory be held? What's the most appropriate? Should we have finished inventory of finished goods in order to maintain the variability in demand? Or is it strategic and actually more cost effective to have inventory of semi-finished products that can be rapidly converted to finished products as required, or even buffers of raw materials to avoid uncertainty in supply at that point in view? So this multi-level inventory optimization is part of the system's capability to make the right decision as to where to hold the stocks, and once we know where to hold the stocks, what the right level of stock is to hold in order to achieve a particular customer service level. Now, I've mentioned a number of times this idea of optimization, and creating plans is difficult, and creating plans in a manual way is even more difficult. But fundamentally, the approach that we use at Dassault Systems is to have an optimal plan. And what do I mean by an optimal plan? Well, the best plan, or the optimal plan, is the one that satisfies the objectives that I have most closely. So I'd like to draw your attention to this panel in the middle, which is the optimization control. So I'm interested in this sequence of priority. So the first thing is have some constraints. I can't overload my maximum inventory level, or my maximum supply, or my stocking point capacity, or my unit capacity. If I overload those, then the plan can't be achieved, it can't be executed. So those are the fundamentals. Having satisfied that, the next thing that I'm interested in is making sure that I satisfy all of my contractual objectives. So my fulfillment targets, so for customers where we are contractually obliged to maintain a certain service level, we will fulfill those first, and then I'll work on to fulfill all of the other demand that I have available to me. After that, we then like to maintain those target inventory levels that we've set. And of course, having done all of those things, I'd like to reduce all of my associated costs, inventory holding, labor, operating, transportation costs, in order to maximize my margin and hence maximize my profit. So using the optimizer is as simple as sequencing those objectives that I have, and the best plan that it will then create will be the plan that does just that. So I don't need to be a mathematical expert, I just need to be able to sequence the objectives that I have in the appropriate way. A fundamental part of this, however, is scenario management. So we need to be able to evaluate all of those different alternatives. So one scenario may deliver a certain result, but it may not be enough. So I want to be interested in what options do I have in order to do better? Could I run additional shifts? Could we actually achieve more inventory capacity? Could we actually refocus our sales to the more profitable area customers to the least profitable one and gain benefit in that way? But by evaluating these scenarios, we then need to be able to compare them and see what's better and what's not so good, so we can then make effective decisions. So the system provides full scenario management capabilities at all levels. So that might be a strategic scenario at the top level, that might be an operational scenario, or it might be a detailed scenario right down at the execution level. How can I best avoid the trouble that's been created by this failure on this particular machine resource? And why a scenario is so important? Well, ultimately, the more information we have and the easier it is to evaluate and compare one option against another, then the more quickly that decision can be made, and fundamentally more different options can be evaluated, and therefore ultimately the exec are able to make better decisions on the strategic direction of our company, or our operational planning team are able to make better decisions on how they will actually plan the next 13 weeks, and the execution layer are able to make better decisions on the sequence that they will put things through. So let's step down a level into that tactical and operational planning space. So here, we're actually dealing rather with the longer term view of the future, maybe based upon a forecast, but the real customer orders as they arrive. And fundamentally, at this more detail level, at the production planning level, we're still using exactly the same digital twin as we did for our strategic layer. So we've got all of the same constraints, we've got all of the same rules, but we're dealing with a more detailed view of that world, generally over a shorter horizon. And we're dealing with, rather than a forecast, but with specific customer orders and what is the best way to actually deliver this specific customer order throughout our end-to-end value chain. And stepping down further again into the execution layer, here we're talking about, well, what's going to happen over the next hours, maybe for a week or 2 weeks out. What's the best sequence to actually make the product in? Which are the constraints as we go down the various different production lines? Which person is going to do which job at which station? Should I staff one side of my line, both sides of my lines, all sides of 2 lines? Do we need specific skills that are the bottleneck? And how can we make sure that we balance our available capacity from a labor standpoint with the required production and our customer orders on time in full? And the link is always made back through all of these different layers to the layer above and indeed the layer below. So decisions that made at the detailed scheduling layer will influence and update the plan at that tactical planning layer, which will influence and update the plan at the strategic planning layer. So by seamlessly integrating all planning layers into one solution, we can make sure that we get that speed of decision making, we make the right decisions, and we get ultimately to the best plan. So optimization, and we say we're talking about true optimization. So what's the difference? Well, in lots of senses, people talk about optimization, and what they mean is, I'd like to make it better. I'd like to optimize it. I'd like this to be better than it was before. But when we talk about optimization, which we use at all levels of the planning hierarchy, we're talking about mathematical optimization. So we're saying that with those KPIs, we can then measure the quality of the plan based upon your objectives. You choose the KPIs, we'll use the KPIs to measure the quality of the plan, and then the solution, the optimization engine, will go and sort through not hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of different planning options, and it will find the best plan. So good is no longer good enough. What we're fundamentally looking for is the best plan, and optimization is the only way through to achieve that best. Heuristics and other planning approaches will give you a good plan, but good is probably no longer good enough. So we've talked quite a lot about the solution and the various different capabilities that it has. But let's spend some time to talk about our customers. How are they using the solution and what benefits have they seen? So the first company I'd like to talk about are Paulig. So Paulig are a Finnish coffee company, and they make over 50,000 tons of coffee each year. And did you know that the Finnish population who per head capita drink more coffee than anybody else? So you might have thought it was the Italians or even the Americans, but no, it's actually the Finnish. And they implemented with us an integrated business planning solution, so at that strategic planning level. And what was life like before they started? Well, probably this is something that many of you out there will be familiar with. It was a whole world of complex spreadsheets, where really the only person who understood the spreadsheet was the person who wrote it in the first place. And each different department and each different actor in the process had their own spreadsheet. And therefore, there was no single version of the truth. There wasn't the interconnectivity that is necessary to make the right decisions. There wasn't the transparency across all of the planning processes. So how has that changed? So this is the new planning process that Paulig follow. It starts at the beginning of the month with a portfolio review. What new products are we launching? Where are they in their development track? When will we actually get the recipe available? And how is that going to influence my supply chain? Where are we going to launch it? What materials do we need to have in place to do that? Will we launch it across all markets in one go or in specific locations? Using that information, we'll then get into our demand review. What's the current forecast looking like? How are we performing historically? What changes are there in the marketplace? What opportunities do we want to follow? And this links through into our supply review. We've got our forecast and we've got an alternative upside and downside as well. How can we best utilize our global supply chain in order to satisfy that demand? Get the right product in the right place at the right time for the right price. Moving on into the financial review. So previously these were fully disconnected, that we'd take that sales, that supply plan, we'd give it over to the financial team who'd work up the numbers and feedback whether that was going to make sure that we met our target or not. Now fundamentally, the detail and the transparency across all of those different levels is completely made in the same system. The financial team can see exactly where the numbers came from, what proportion of that cost was materials, what proportion of that cost was transportation, what proportion of that cost was fixed assets, and so on. And in the coffee industry, this is fundamental because the beans themselves are a commodity, and therefore the blending, making the right recipe and mixing the different beans compared to the price that we were able to buy them for, fundamentally makes the difference between being reasonably profitable and very profitable. And therefore this future price planning and this blend recipe optimization based upon the true price of the ingredients as experienced in this dynamic and ever-changing worlds is fundamentally a game changer for Paulig. And this was the real value of having that interconnected process. And to complete the journey, our executive group then review the different scenarios, make the critical decisions, make the decisions to buy the additional bean or alter the supply chain configuration in one way or another in order to maximize the overall benefit. So Paulig used 3 different solutions for within the Dassault Systems brand, demand planning, blend pricing, which is a specific solution, and then financial planning. So across all of the different elements of that integrated business planning, from the demand planning side through the supply planning side and the financial evaluation and analysis for that decision making is covered. So what benefits have they seen? Well, really the ability to create more accurate forecasts using accurate attribute-based forecasting in the first place, very much increased integrated business planning process efficiency. So from days and days to actually create a plan in the first place, so that they can now create multiple scenarios within a day and therefore evaluate the alternatives and improve that decision-making quality. And this is driven by that scenario planning. So the ability to create multiple what-if scenarios, deal with the impact of different promotions, ask questions, well, what if this material price were to change? What if this blend price were to change? What if this new product were to be introduced a little bit later or a little bit earlier? How would that change the overall plan? And improve visibility into financials. No more questions of, well, how did that number come from? What was it based upon? What are the details behind this spreadsheet? We can see and fully trace the answers to those sorts of questions. The second customer that I'd like to talk to you about are Kraft Heinz. So this is probably a company we're all quite familiar with. And the puzzle here was about planning an optimization of the recipes within their Oscar Mayer division. So the objectives were quite clearly stated here. We want to minimize the total cost of manufacturing while fulfilling all of our demand. And this was a highly complex project. So we need to decide how much meat to buy, from when and from where for each of our supplier contracts, what batches to store and for how long, and how much meat to hold in inventory at the various different production stages. And this manufacturing process is highly constrained. We've got food safety limits, we've got supply constraints inbound, we've got demand constraints outbound, we've got processing capacity constraints for all of the different production processes, and then we've got inventory capacity constraints for the raw materials, the work in progress, and the finished materials. And they have two planning horizons: operational, 2 to 4 weeks, and then tactical for 1 to 12 months. And this whole puzzle covers over 2.5 million constraints. So this is a significant size, but it's not unusual for the sort of puzzles that the Dassault Systems solution is able to support. Fundamentally, the question that they ask is, what's the most efficient recipe that I can make? What should I make today from what in order to minimize the overall production cost and therefore maximize the margin that we take? So we're making those blending decisions for all of those plants, using all of those constraints for each day, and also on that longer term tactical horizon. And the achievements have been quite dramatic in terms of the simplicity of the new use of the system. So all of that complexity previously was managed in a bunch of different systems, and the planning team didn't really know whether they were creating, a good plan, an average plan, or a great plan. And fundamentally, with the change in approach and the optimization technology implemented, they're now able to say with a high degree of confidence, this is the best plan. How about that for a message for your exec? This is the best plan we can do, and I can prove it to you. Here are all of the different inputs that we've taken. Here are the measures. Here were the alternatives that were considered. This is best. And also, I think their CEO makes an important point. Transformation or disruption is also a moment of opportunity. So we're all highly disrupted at the moment by the COVID-19 situation, but that's also a moment of opportunity. The companies who respond best and are able to manage that disruption and are able to return to normality, or maybe a new normality, those are the companies that will get ahead. Those are the companies that will have the most success in the future. And Kraft recognized this with their transformation journey some years ago. The third customer I'd like to talk to you about are Amy's Kitchen. Amy's Kitchen have been around 33 years. They've got over 300 products now, and they're very much focused on high quality meals delivered direct to your door. So they have a complex and varied supply chain. They deliver over 1 million meals a day. So those are freshly prepared and cooked, and also then delivered either in a frozen or ambient sense. So tofu, pasta, tortillas. Ambient and also frozen, so they have that complexity within their supply chain. And the products themselves are also complex. So here's just one example of those 300. The breakfast scramble looks pretty good. There are 61 processes to schedule, 78 ingredient inputs, 37 different points along the journey where we could have work in progress stock held. And this is just one of the 300 recipes that need to be planned and across the 1 million meals that are produced each day. So this is a highly complex planning process. We've got a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different constraints, and a lot of different people. So over the years, Amy's have developed a solution from that strategic planning level all the way down into the execution layer. So macro planner for raw materials and forecasting and dealing with plant purchases, scheduler for the operational horizon, so what are we actually going to make on each day and who's going to be required, and then workforce. So this is, like many processes within the food and beverage industry, quite labor intensive. Amy's are particularly focused on quality output, and therefore they're resistant to automation if there's any risk that will reduce the quality of the output product. So the availability of employees and what they're going to be doing and the allocation of employees to the line is a fundamental cornerstone of their production puzzle. And then down on into distribution. So this is a home delivery solution. So once we've made the meals, we need then to get them to our customers on time so they can enjoy them. And some of the benefits that have been achieved are quite transformational. So with that labor scheduling puzzle, ultimately having implemented that solution, they're able to service their customers with 25% less inventory. So a full quarter reduction. Imagine what change that would make if it was achieved within your company. Also, on that distribution side, they've been able to increase their truck utilization from 80 to 99%. So almost perfect. And that kind of benefit, that kind of reduction in empty miles, again, financially incredibly impactful. It comes to that story of, well, is good enough? Well, no, we want to be the best. And we want to be able to prove that we're the best. Well, if you've got your utilization rates up above 99%, then probably you can fairly safely argue that this is probably the best we can do. And that optimization capability is the way of achieving that. So to wrap up and to conclude, I'd like to take a little bit of a journey into the near future with you. So imagine if we're able to fully link our supply chain end to end and leverage that digital twin in order to evaluate all those planning decisions up front. So from the original concept of a product, its design, its manufacturing method, then the digital manufacturing of the supply chain itself. How will this physically perform as it goes through my manufacturing line? What will be my achievable production rates? What potentially would be the issues? What's the right design of my manufacturing process in the first place? And then on into the planning and execution of that new product. How are we going to launch it? When are we going to launch it? What will be the impact on the production scheduling? And then on through to the execution, monitoring of the lines and making sure that we're doing the maintenance necessary in order to keep the efficiency up and the production rates where we expect them to be. So here is an example of that. And all of this is available already on the 3D Experience platform. So here's my new bottle design. I'm considering reducing the plastic thickness, but I want to understand how that's going to feel in my hand. Will it deform as it goes through the transportation process? Will it deform as I try and take the cap off? I can experience and test all of that ahead of time. But then having designed my new product, so a long way off a prototype, how will that perform in my production line? So here is the digital twin of my production line. Here's my new bottle going through, and I can test already whether it's going to cause any issues, whether we're going to have any snags before we even get to a physical product, and certainly much more easily and cheaply than doing test runs. But then also we can look about the planning of the launch of the new item. A product is only as good as your capability to get it into the marketplace and actually make the sales necessary. So I can plan for that new product launch. I can make sure that we've got the right materials. I can make sure that we've got the available capacity before we even get to that point of making the final decision to launch it. And then once we're actually into an execution space, what should be that how will this new product and the orders that we're expecting to get for it influence the production plan that we've got in the context of all of the other products that we're already making? How will that change? What's the right sequence to then produce things in? And how can we monitor that and make sure that we get the benefit? And ultimately down to execution of the line, monitoring the output. Did the planned production output match the reality? Or were there discrepancies? And if there were discrepancies, what were the reason for that? And what changes can we make in terms of the configuration of the line to match the plan? Or what changes do we need to make to the plan to make sure that we're respecting the capabilities on the line? But that's not where the journey stops. Using virtual reality and other 3D techniques, we can already talk to our retailers about how that new product's going to look on the shelf, how it might look in your home, and also what that retail experience would be. As I walk the store and I'm searching and I'm browsing, and we find a new product, what information is available? How does that look? How does it feel on the shelf? And even down to the details of the packaging. What information is there on the back so I can evaluate whether this is the right product for me? So that was the initial journey that I wanted to talk to you about. But we are, of course, experiencing fundamental disruption right now due to the pressures of the COVID-19 pandemic. And here at Dassault Systems, we've been thinking about how we can actually help companies with that transformation journey. How can we deliver benefit rapidly and help you respond to the challenges that you're facing? We've got a number of specific solutions designed for rapid deployment, hosted by us, and therefore just add data, if you will, to tackle some of these things. Maybe particularly of interest, food and beverage industry, are those workforce challenges. People are not necessarily available for work. They're staying at home, and when they are available for work, we need to implement new social distancing guidelines within our production factories. So that question of how can we get the most benefit from the workforce that we have, how can we make sure we plan and schedule effectively, is one of these emergency planning solutions that's available. We're also offering solutions in supply chain planning space and also last mile distribution. So if you have any interest in those, please do reach out and contact us.
Thank you very much for the great presentation, Jeff. We have some time left for questions, and I see that we have received some already. For the others, you can still submit your questions via the control panel, and in the meantime, we will start with the first questions. So the first question is, how does the planner know whether his plan is executable?
Yeah. So absolutely. Any plan that we create, it's essential that we can actually execute that plan. And the way that we tackle that is through that concept of the digital twin. So the digital twin of our production line or the digital twin of our supply chain, it's not actually just covering the locations that we have. It's not just covering the recipes that we have, but it's also covering the rules that we have and the constraints that we have. So if we take the example of a production line, we know how many people are going to be available. We know what the speed of that line is. We know the different products that we're actually going to manufacture down it. And when the planning engine runs, when the optimizer runs, it will consider all of those constraints automatically and such that the plan that it suggests has already been constrained by the reality of the world. So we know with a high degree of confidence that it can be executed. Of course, if you want to make manual planning changes, that's also okay, because these rules also form the basis of alerts in the system. So as they alter the plan, it's constantly checking in the background all of these constraints such that if I try and manually create a plan that is also not executable, we'll be warned of that and prevented from making those kind of mistakes, which ultimately could then be costly if we publish that plan to the line only to find out that they can't do it.
Thank you very much. And the next question is, how does the system deal with sudden changes in demand or disruptions on the shop floor?
Yeah, of course, a plan is a great thing to have, and as somebody once said, the problem is that no plan ever survives the first engagement with the enemy. And I guess for the shop floor, the enemy are unplanned disruptions, so unexpected downtime or machine breakdowns or unexpected shortages of materials or those kind of things. So these kind of disruptions, of course, will happen. And due to the dynamic and real-time nature of the system, what we're able to see is as soon as that disruption occurs, and we get that feedback and it's updated into the system, the plan will automatically respond to that. So if we're suddenly expecting there to be a downtime, a machine breakdown, and we put that into the system, that feedback is received, the plan will then reshape around it and be re-optimized to be the new best plan. So that was the best plan we had. We've now got this disruption. This is the new best plan that we can create. So those disruptions, once communicated, are in many ways automatically responded to. It also could be a shortage in terms of material availability. So the consequence of the decisions are propagated throughout the solution. So the impact of that change is updated in the plan, and then we can plan again from that new reality.
Thank you. And here is another question. What's the major reason you see food customers implementing new solutions in these difficult times?
Yeah, so we're seeing quite a lot of evolution and change, certainly in that home delivery space. Right now, in that because people's buying patterns have changed, they're not going out to the restaurant for obvious reasons, but they're buying a lot more from the supermarket. But equally, they'd like that to be delivered to their home because we're limited in where we can go. So we're finding a lot of companies that are really investing heavily in their home delivery network and their planning capabilities around that. Imagine that increase in truck efficiency that Amy has achieved, from 80% to 99%, how that would influence your own supply chain network. So we're seeing a lot of projects right now in that kind of space. But of course, managing disruption is not something that we need to deal with just now, but also for the future. And therefore, we're finding that that companies are investing in that capability to respond to change, both in the future and really whether the solutions of the past, the heuristic-based systems, which keep a good plan but not a great plan and certainly not the best plan, are no longer sufficient. And therefore actually joining it all together, breaking down those silo walls and actually moving up that maturity curve tend to be the drivers for the investments in this sort of planning area.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we don't have time to answer all questions now, but we will make sure to answer any remaining questions via email. Thanks to everyone who has submitted questions. And also thank you very much for your attention. Hope to see you soon again in one of our upcoming webinars. Also a big thank you to you, Jeff. And if you have any other questions later on, you can also send me an email. You can see my email address. And yeah, thank you very much and have a great day.
Yep. Thank you, Anna, and thank you everybody for joining. If you have any questions, please do submit them and we'll aim to respond as quickly as possible. And have a great afternoon, morning or evening, wherever you are around the world.